My name is Mallory Greene, excited to be here today. Appreciate TechTO for having me. Today I'm going to walk you through a little bit how I got into the funeral industry, because people are always like, what the heck are you doing in the funeral industry? And a few traits that I've developed over the past 3 years of entrepreneurship. So I called it the making of an entrepreneur in a regulated industry. So as I said, Mallory Greene, the CEO of Eirene Cremations, we are focused on simplifying the end-of-life experience, and specifically that is in death tech. That's the name the media has given it. There's probably a better name. It seems a little harsh. But generally speaking, as I said, when people hear that I'm in the death tech industry, they ask how I got into it. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about my background. So initially, I was at the University of Guelph. I studied international development, and unlike most students who do a lot of co-ops and internships, I had absolutely no experience when I graduated university. And I actually got a nonprofit job with the head of marketing from Wealthsimple, and he brought me down one time in September 2014 and said, you should come join this new startup I just joined called Wealthsimple. This was our very first booth that we put on. It was the sketchiest thing in the world. And I joined in September 2014 and stayed for 5 years. So had an incredible journey in tech, worked in marketing, HR, recruiting, and launched the Wealthsimple Foundation. And throughout my time there, I was really searching for an industry that I felt I could combine my tech knowledge with an industry that I had a deep understanding of. And I happen to be the daughter of a funeral director. My mom is also a hospice nurse. So it's very morbid, but I grew up around death, and that really led me to starting to look into the funeral industry. So I think anyone, when you think of funeral services, it's like truly the most outdated thing you could think of. It's a large Victorian funeral home with movie theater carpeting. There's a man probably in like a very, very old suit. And the reality is that the industry is changing substantially. So the cremation rate in Canada today is 80%. The cost continues to rise. So the average Canadian pays about $5,000–6,000 for a cremation. And people are kind of reinventing how we memorialize. And so that's how Eirene came to be. Really this idea of modernizing a very outdated, archaic space and making it more affordable and accessible for the average family. So today we operate in 5 provinces, and we are launching in our first US state probably within the next month. Jason's an investor, so he's biased. So I'm just gonna walk you through quickly three years we've been in business, and 3 traits that I've developed over the past 3 years, and they're gonna be a bit different from what you typically hear from entrepreneurs, because most things entrepreneurs say are very annoying. So this is a photo from one of the regulators' websites. This represents funeral services today. And so the very first trait I learned was composure. We are dealing with legislation that is years old. I'm having a lot of conversations with people who have absolutely no industry insights or knowledge. And I feel like as an entrepreneur, the biggest thing that you learn is a lot of patience, because you want things to move so quickly, but they just won't, especially in regulated industries. And so the composure that I've developed, the professional composure, when I just want to rip my hair out in some conversations, has been next level, but very crucial to my success as we continue to build. Now we have a photo of a funeral home owner in Texas. There's a really interesting article about him online. He's doing very shady things. And so the second trait that I've learned is indifference. And I know that sounds really weird, but we get a lot of harassment. We get a lot of complaints from funeral home owners. We get people who told us they tried to build it decades ago, and I say the internet wasn't even invented at that point. We get a lot of pushback, and when you're as an entrepreneur, and just generally when you're in regulated spaces, you will have a lot of pushback. You'll have people telling you that your idea doesn't make sense or it's never gonna work because they tried it. And I just don't give a fuck, to be honest. So generally, I think it's so critical to keep your eyes forward, never looking back at your rearview mirror. Pay attention to what other people are doing from a creativity or an ideas standpoint, but all the hate, get rid of it. And then the last one I think is so crucial and pretty standard, and Oh, there. Pretty standard in entrepreneurship. It's conviction, because being an entrepreneur and a founder is incredibly difficult, and especially when you have all the pushback and the mind-blowing conversations, waking up every day and knowing that my business is really important and that families deserve access to affordable, accessible services is why I keep going forward. So those are the 3 traits. Here I am today. I went from a white suit to a black dress. Someone actually emailed me that my white suit was not appropriate for funeral services, one of the funeral home owners. And yeah, that's just a face of indifference and composure. Thank you. Oh, questions? Any questions for me? Yep.
We have a question. JP does it. You don't have to spell out your question this time, letter by letter. You can just recite it.
That's funny. I always do that. I spell my words. I'm just curious, like, tell us about like your product or service. Like, how does it differ from the usual experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's really 3 key points to our service. So we're about half the cost of a traditional funeral home. We're $2,500. As I said, the average Canadian pays about $5,000 to $6,000. The main reason for that, we don't have overhead. So we don't have that big funeral home that you would walk into, fill out a bunch of paperwork, see the outdated suit. So the affordability is the first point. The second point is the accessibility of our services. You can arrange from wherever you are. You don't have to walk into a funeral home. You can do so online or over the phone, from hospital, home, wherever. Especially nowadays where families are transient. I mean, we're all over the place, so being able to arrange from those places is super critical. And then I think the last is really the educational piece of our service. The industry is very opaque, and most people aren't thinking and planning, so when they get thrown into it, it's really hard to navigate. And so we currently have built like a huge amount of content and information for people to be able to navigate not only end of life and funeral services, but all throughout death care and pre-planning.
How you doing? Awesome job. What about cultural sort of, I don't know if this is the right term, but cultural-centric services?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely something that we've thought a lot about. To be honest, from a regulatory perspective, we've been very restricted on what we can or cannot offer. So right now we offer direct cremation and something called direct aquamation. I could do a whole presentation on what aquamation is. It's a water-based cremation. You should Google it. You'll see Irene's article come up first. But definitely we want to be able to expand our offerings. The reality, though, is that we can still offer services and people can plan with their specific cultural groups or religious groups, their churches, etc. Those things can mutually exist.
Okay, it's the first paid ad, Mallory. It's not the first organic result.
Aquamation?
Aquamationinfo.com comes up first organically. Second is Eirene.
Okay,
That's pretty good. Okay, round of applause for Mallory's SEO.
Let's see your rankings. Am I good?
Just to be clear, Mallory and I used to work together in marketing.
He was my manager. It was the worst year of my life.
Can we do a presentation on that next? Okay,
no, that's on trauma. We have one more question.
We'll have one here, and then we'll do a last one up there.
Yeah, nice one. Great presentation there. So I was just curious, with your kind of afterlife services there, I think the gentleman here kind of touched on it briefly. Are there specific different types of ways? Like I know that the burial pods are quite popular. Some people want to get like boiled down into like a diamond and become a Horcrux in a skull or something. What other types of products, I guess, are you guys selling there, and maybe the services?
Yeah, for sure. So we refer our families to different options. So like you said, you can be made into a diamond, you can do stones, you can be sent to space, you can be made into a vinyl record. There's a lot of different options, scattering. So ultimately, I think the reality is that the industry overall is reimagining how we memorialize people and creating new ways to do so. In the US, there's something called human composting, which is exactly how it is described. But once again, it's just kind of reimagining the overall of what people can do after to memorialize.
Our last question.
Hi, Mallory. Diana Robinson. So I'm going to talk out, and I hope my question's going to come out of this. So I guess it's possible that you would care for some families and maybe never ever meet them in person. Mm-hmm. And so is it that use of technology, being able to arrange and execute the services that allowed you to be so scalable and so successful?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so as you said, we do not meet with our families in person. We do have a drop-off service, so we will deliver the remains back to you, and that's kind of that human interaction that we'll have at the end to wrap up the experience. But absolutely, that's how we can scale our services across the US. The infrastructure of funeral services is the same regardless of province or state in terms of who we operate and partner with. And we can basically turnkey launch our services anywhere. It's just the licensing that takes the most time.
Thank you, Mallory.
Thank you.